I remember you had a podcast with the guy. I think he was an Indian guy already in Canada. He also was trying to pass his essay part, and it also was taking him a very long time. And how he was saying that he was writing almost every day and working on his vocabulary. Like, it was also pretty inspirational.
Yes, yeah, this is it. It's like a positive loop,
Yes.
The previous students inspire the next ones and so on. And yeah, I think you were talking about Vinod. He was a star student.
Yes,
And
yes.
We are here to guide you through this test jungle. Enjoy these IELTS tutorials, and if you need more help or want to access the famous online course, you can visit us at IELTSPodcast.com.
Hi IELTS podcast students. In this podcast today we're going to look at Academic Task 1, and particularly we're going to look at how to describe a table. Now, I know Task 1 is not the favourite task for lots of you. It's very easy to look at a table and panic and think, how on earth do I start with all this data? What am I going to do? But in this podcast, I'm just going to talk you through really clearly what to do, how to do it, and we're going to look at crafting a really well thought out answer so that when you do come across an IELTS academic question asking you to compare and summarise data in a table, you will be confident. So this will help you in your reading and understanding of the data for the IELTS Task 1 chart table and help you describe it in a clear and precise manner that the examiners will really like. Also going to be sharing with you some vocab, some really good phrases that you can use in your writing, and these will start you off on a lovely complex sentence structure which will help you on the grammatical range and accuracy. So I want you to listen out for these 3 phrases. In fact, even better, you could write them down now and tick them off when you hear them in the model answer we're going to analyse and really get into. So these are 3 phrases that you could incorporate into your answer. Great high-level phrases. They're going to get you into a nice complex grammatical structure. So here they are. An inspection of the data in the table clearly shows. An inspection of the data in the table clearly shows. In the 3rd column, there's a distinct growth trend. And there is a significant difference between the proportion of, and then you can carry on after that. So my name's Daphne. I'm one of the tutors here at IELTSPodcast.com. And I'm just going to share with you my story with IELTS. So I started teaching IELTS about 7 years ago. I was thrown in the deep end, as we say, which means that I was given an IELTS class to teach when, to be honest, I didn't really know enough about the exam myself. It's not a great way to start. When the students know more than you and you are always trying to catch up, that is pretty hard as a teacher. I knew I had to learn rapidly. I knew IELTS was worth specialising in. It is very motivating working with students who really want to succeed. All of you are listening to this because you're preparing for your IELTS. You want to do really well. We're here to absolutely help you with that. First thing to do is sign up to the newsletter. That will give you offers, special offers, all the details of the courses we offer. Essay corrections, so you can send in an essay, get some feedback, find out where you're going wrong, find out what's amazing, and that will really, really help you in your preparation. So I had to learn, as I say, different sections of the exam, how to become confident myself, and in becoming confident myself and practicing and writing lots of different Task 1 answers, I began to understand the pattern that you need to be able to write these answers and to really look at the data that I needed and the data that I didn't really need. So the table we're going to reference today talks about the population of a country. The country is not given, but there's a wide range of dates. It's from 2015 till 2070. So that's going to be interesting in terms of some of the tenses we might be using. And have a look in the notes for this podcast because you will see the table there. So you'll probably find this podcast more relevant if you're looking at the table while I'm talking. So it has 4 columns. The first one is the years. That's going from 2015 up to 2070. It's grouped in 5 years initially. So 2015, 20, 25, 30, 35. Then there's a gap. And then the last 2 are 2050 and 2070. In a minute, we're going to talk about grouping. Now, where would you make your groups? Having just listened to that, where would you make your groups? The next column is the total population, that's in millions. The next column is the population age 75 and over in millions. And then the fourth one is that same amount of people, so the over 75s, but in a percentage of the total. So for example, just to give, if you can't see that immediately, 2015 would be the year, 64.8 million is the total population, 5.4 million are the over 75s, which is 8.33%. I'm not that good at maths, it's written down for me. There's nothing to be scared of. So first thing we have to do, summarise the table. This is a really important skill. It sounds simple, but it's actually the focus of the entire task. Look at the table first. Before you even write anything, you need to get a pencil or a pen, or if you're on a computer, just write down some notes somewhere or memorize these things. Look at the figures of the table and look at what it's telling you. What is it talking about here? What are you thinking about? This is obviously the number of people. Sometimes it's the number of students. Sometimes it's a food item, or it could be something to do with animals, something to do with exports. You've seen probably lots of questions already in your practice, but it could be anything. So look at what it's talking about. Look at the figures, and then really importantly, look at the tense. So is it in the present? Is it in the past? Or is it going to predict future trends? So this one is going to predict future, which is quite nice because I can show my language and I can show my confidence here in my structures. So this helps you to decide which tense to use. So I could say things like the numbers are predicted to rise, or expected to rise, or anticipated to reach. That's using it as a verb. Or I could say predictions indicate that, using the word as a noun and putting it at the beginning of my sentence, which works quite effectively in academic style writing. So also, as I'm thinking at the data, I'm going to make a list of any description vocabulary that might be useful. So this is about people, and the word given on the table is population. I don't want to repeat population all the whole time. That's going to be boring, and that's not going to get me any points in vocabulary. So I'm going to use, instead of synonyms for population, I could say the number of inhabitants, the total number of people, the proportion of citizens. So you can see very quickly that's not really sophisticated language, it's just an alternative, so I'm not repeating myself. So first thing, summarise the table. What is it talking about? Second thing, divide up the data. This is a key tip. The data can be very difficult to handle. There's a lot of it. As I say to all my students numerous times, group and compare. Group and compare. Don't give me a list. You're not going to get a band 7 if you write a list. You need to group and compare. That is going to show your skill in grammar and your skill in managing and showing the language. So split that data into manageable pieces. I asked you a question earlier. Where would you make the divide? So what I'm going to do here is take the sections which are in 5 years. So 2015, 20, 25, 30, 35. So between 2015 and 2035, that's going to be my first group. And my second group, because then there's a pause, is 2050 and 2070. So because those are further apart, those groups, further into the future, I'm going to treat those in my second paragraph. So that's an obvious way to group. Sometimes in a pie chart, for example, you might find the larger sections in one group and the smaller sections in the other. It's just the same as if you're doing a table. Find a natural place where the information will group and work it that way. Group and compare. So what could be grouped, as we said, is the highest numbers, the lowest numbers. You could group by popularity. You could group by when. So we're grouping by when something is expected to happen. So remember, no lists. So it makes it easier, obviously, if the data can be divided into two significant groups. It's easier for you to understand, and of course, it's easier to explain. Also, though, look for exceptions in the data, which is where something interesting happens or something stands out for you. So this helps you get started by describing the data and information you can see, not just the highest and lowest, but anything really unusual or anything that isn't part of a pattern or overall trend. Some of the language you might use, we talked about vocab. I said I was going to give you some great vocab. Some of the vocab you could use at the beginning to introduce your answer is something like this. It's apparent from this table that considerable growth occurs in the middle years. Or it's apparent from this table that considerable information is given about the older generation. What I really want you to focus on is the beginning of this sentence. It's apparent from this table. You could also have something like, what stands out from this table? Although for me that might be a little bit informal. I prefer to stick with the formal side, the really academic style. Closer inspection of the table shows that, or closer inspection of the table reveals a wide disparity between the years 2015 and the years 2030. So a wide disparity is a wide difference. You could also use a phrase like this. An inspection of the data in the table reveals the rapid increase in the aging proportion of the population. So if you start off your sentence with one of those lovely phrases, you're really going to carry on your sentence in a very nice high-level way. Let's have a look at this model answer, and then we're going to get into a bit of analysis of that. So introduction. And before I just read it, I want you to think of this in 4 sections. So 4 sections, not 4 paragraphs, it's misleading for me to say that, but 4 sections. So the first section is your introduction. That's really just a couple of lines. You're paraphrasing the title of the graph or the table or the pie chart. So here, this table compares the UK's 55-year projected growth of the number of people over the age 75 with that of the total population. Okay, I apologise, I said there was no country connected to it, but now I've just reread the title. It does actually say the UK. So the UK's 55-year projected growth of the number of people over the age 75 with that of the total population. So that's my introduction. That's just literally a line. I'm then going to have my 2 paragraphs with details, and at the end I'm going to have a summary sentence or an overall sentence. Now the overall sentence or the summary sentence is extremely important. If you do not have that, you are not considered to have achieved the task. So obviously that's the task achievement, the task response. You do need one of those sentences. It doesn't really matter if you put it at the end or if you put it after that little introduction sentence. There's no real difference, but it has to be included. Some people say it's better to put it at the end because if you're running out of time, obviously the content you're going to have in your paragraphs is more intense than the content that's going to be in the overall sentence. So here I've got my little introduction. The table compares the UK's 55-year projected growth of the number of people over the age 75 with that of the total population. First paragraph. I'm grouping that group, remember, from 2015 to 2035. It's estimated that in the 20 years from 2015, the total population of the UK will have grown by almost 10 million, from 64.8 million in 2015 to 73.2 million in 2035. An inspection of the data table clearly shows that. Okay, so here was one of my phrases from the beginning. An inspection of the data in the table clearly shows that the number of over 75s will also increase significantly from 5.4 million 2015 to 8.9 million 2035, which is a rise of nearly 4%. So I'm getting into the numbers, I'm getting into the detail, I'm focusing on those 2 specific years, but I'm focusing on the trend, what's happening during that time. Remember that key phrase I mentioned from the beginning, tick that one off now. An inspection of the data in the table clearly shows that the number of over 75s will also increase significantly. Now, if you're into grammar, you might have noticed a really nice grammar tense that I used there. The total population of the UK will have grown by almost 10 million. Now, that's a future perfect. We don't use that very often, but really nice to be able to use it. We use that when we're looking forward, we are in a forward time, and then we're looking back. So we're in 2035 and we're looking back to that increase. Paragraph 2. The estimated figures for 2050 and 2070, illustrated in the third column, indicate a distinct growth trend will continue, and the total population will be as high as 82 million by 2070. Although the proportion of inhabitants aged 75 or older is thought to remain relatively stable between 2035 and 2050, the number will continue to swell, and by 2070, nearly 15% of the population, 11 to 12 million, is predicted to be aged 75 or over. There is a significant difference between the proportion of older citizens seen in 2015 and expected in 2070, which will have almost doubled. So there's a lot of complexity in that second paragraph, really getting into the detail, grouping that information, picking out the most important points that I want to bring, comparing that information between one year and another year. So I've really got those 2 groups quite clear. Summary sentence. Overall, it's anticipated the number of people aged over 75 is likely to double by 2070. So let's just look at the structure of that. Let's go back into that in a little bit more detail. Another thing to do, make your point really clearly. How you structure your answer can help the flow of it. So as we said, divide it into 4 sections, 2 main paragraphs, which can be used so you can describe each group of data. That means that one group of the data will be described in paragraph 1, and the second group will be a new paragraph. Keep things organized, and that helps you keep track of your overall point. So visually, you're thinking about 4 sections. Compare and contrast. So compare and contrast and highlight the exceptions. This is how you're going to get a super good score. Remember, you're not listing, you're comparing your information and you're contrasting it with other information that's there in that data. So for example, if the first paragraph is comparing data, the second point is talking about this in more detail and linking back and comparing again to the data explored in the first summary. You can almost think of it sometimes like a circular motion, going back to the beginning and making a connection between what you're saying in the final end of the second paragraph back up to the beginning. The final summary or overall sentence ties it in nicely. So as we said, it doesn't matter where it is, but that's explaining either what you're going to talk about or what you have talked about. Now, quite a good tip for this is do not include numbers in your overall sentence. It's a great time for you to show superlatives, really especially superlatives. The highest information was seen in this, or the highest growth was seen in this year, while or whereas, nice connecting words, the lowest is clearly visible in another year. Something like that, something general, but something really highlighting the highs and lows. Nice way to start. So let's go through the example again, or let's go through the structure. Introductory statement. Explain what you're going to compare. Paragraph 1 is your comparisons, description and detail of the group 1 and any exceptions. Paragraph 2, same thing, descriptions, comparatives of the second group of information, and then quite nice to connect something in this back to the beginning to have that nice circular motion. Let's go back into that model answer. So at the beginning, your intro. This table compares the UK's 55-year projected growth of the number of people over the age of 75 with that of the total population. Paragraph 1. It's estimated that, so nice way to start, in the 20 years from 2015, the total population will have grown by almost 10 million. So I'm giving you an overview of what's happening in those 20 years, and I'm using that amazing grammar, will have grown by almost 10 million. Here's a few bits of detail from 64.8 million in 2015 to 73.2 in 2035. An inspection of the data in the table clearly shows that. So again, a really nice grammatical structure, great phrase, write it down, use it. Shows that the number of over 75s will also increase significantly. So I'm talking about a different part of the trend or the data. First sentence was the total population. This is the over 75s. It will increase significantly from 5.4 million to 8.9. I could say will almost double from 5.4 to 8.9, and that will show a good connection between those different numbers. So the paragraph 2, the estimated figures for 2050 and 2070, so now I'm in my second group, illustrated in the third column, indicate a distinct growth trend will continue. So again, these lovely expressions here indicate a distinct growth trend will continue, and the total population will be as high as 82 million by 2070. Although, and you could equally use the word while, the proportion of inhabitants aged 75 or older is thought to remain relatively stable between 2035 and 2050. I'm giving you the numbers as well. The number will continue to swell, and by 2070, nearly 15% of the population, 11 to 12 million, is predicted to be aged 75 or older. So I'm pointing out in that paragraph the exception. So this is between 2035 and 2050. That's a 15-year gap where there's expected to be not very much growth. So that was my exception to the rule. Then I'm going back in with the number will continue to swell. You could even say overall, or continue to swell as a trend, as a general trend. And by 2070, nearly 15% of the population is predicted to be aged 75 or older. Here's another one of my key phrases I want to use as well. There's a significant difference between the proportion of older citizens seen in 2015 and expected in 2070, which will have almost doubled. So very important there, that really nice introduction. There's a significant difference between the proportion of older citizens seen in 2015 and expected in 2070. So hopefully that gives you a really good example of the detail that you need to include in this table. And then my summary sentences coming in at the end. So overall, it's anticipated that the number of people aged over 75 is likely to double by 2070. So using that model answer, let's just summarize again what it's doing. The introduction is talking about what the table shows. The paragraph 1 is taking a closer look at the first 20 years. The paragraph 2 is reporting on the direction of the trend, highlighting detail about the proportion, and then connecting that into the overall sentence. And the summary sentence describes something significant and is going to summarize really what you've been saying. Equally, if you prefer to put that at the beginning, it's going to show what you're talking about. So points to remember: don't include your own opinion or any information that is not asked for. No speculation here. It's not asking you why you think this is happening. Don't include too many figures in your answer. Yes, we want figures, but not every single number you can see, because we want the language. It's a language exam. Most important, don't forget to plan your structure carefully. If you want some help on this task 1, get into the website, sign up to the podcast newsletter. That will show you all the special offers that we have. Send in your essay for some feedback. Feedback is the best way to improve. We can tell you what you're doing right. We can help show you what is not so good, what you need to improve on. Every time you send in an essay for correction on the course, we help you, we guide you personally how to improve your own writing. The course focuses on task 2 writing and focuses also on task 1, how to do these tricky academic task 1s. It really is worthwhile getting some help with this. So just to end, let's look at the vocabulary again. These are particularly useful at the beginning of your paragraphs. An inspection of the data in the table clearly shows. That was one I used. Here's another one. In the third column, there's a distinct growth trend. That was another one. There's a significant difference between the increase or the pattern, or there's a disparity between, or a difference in the growth. So you can carry on that sentence whichever way you want, but those are great ways to start. So thank you for listening to this podcast. We've talked all about Academic Task 1 tables. We've looked at how to organise your answer. We've looked at some of the data to include. We've looked at ways of how you can include that in a really lovely high-level way by looking at vocabulary and some key phrases which you could be including. And as I say, if you're struggling, if you've got friends who are struggling with IELTS preparation, sign up to the newsletter, get involved with us. We're really happy to help you. We will guide you. We will give you feedback. We will help you to improve. I'm Daphne. Thanks for listening to this podcast from IELTS Podcast.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.